The boardroom went silent as Rebecca Thornton's hands trembled over the acquisition papers. $2.1 billion. The buyer's name at the bottom made her blood run cold. Nathan Porter. The same Nathan she'd divorced 8 years ago while he was sleeping on his brother's couch. The same Nathan she'd called a failure to his face. And now he owned everything. But we need to go back to when Nathan Porter was 28 years old, eating ramen for the 3rd night in a row, hunched over a laptop held together with duct tape in a studio apartment he could barely afford. His wife Rebecca sat across from him, designer purse on her lap, fresh from another lunch with her corporate friends. "Nathan, we need to talk." Her voice had that edge he'd been hearing more and more lately. He looked up from the code he'd been debugging for 6 hours straight. "Can it wait? I'm so close to finishing the prototype." "No, it can't wait." She stood up, and something about her posture made his stomach drop. "I'm done. I'm done with this poverty. I'm done pretending your little app is going to change our lives." He closed the laptop slowly. "Becca, I just need 6 more months. The venture capital meeting is—" I've heard this before. 6 more months, 1 more investor, 1 more version. Meanwhile, my friends are buying houses, going on vacations, building actual lives. And I'm here watching you chase a fantasy. The words came next, the ones he'd replay in his mind thousands of times over the years that followed. She pulled off her wedding ring, the simple silver band he'd saved 3 months to buy, and placed it on the chipped IKEA table between them. "You're never going to succeed, Nathan. You're a dreamer, and I can't drown with you anymore." 3 weeks later, the divorce papers arrived. 2 weeks after that, he saw her engagement announcement on social media to Richard Thornton, CEO of Thornton Tech Industries. The comments gushed about the power couple, about Rebecca's brilliant strategy mind finally being appreciated. Nathan sat in that empty apartment staring at the prototype that had cost him his marriage and made himself a promise. 5 years passed like a blur of 70-hour work weeks and cold coffee. Nathan's app, a revolutionary AI-powered project management system called Synergy, launched with 300 users, then 3,000, then 300,000. The first million in revenue felt like vindication. The first 10 million felt like justice. By year 7, Synergy was valued at $800 million, and Nathan Porter was no longer the man sleeping on his brother's couch. But here's what nobody knew, what Nathan himself barely acknowledged during those years of building his empire. Every single decision he made, every feature he added, every partnership he formed, had one hidden compass point: Thornton Tech Industries. Because Rebecca hadn't just married Richard Thornton, she'd become his secret weapon. Her strategy mind, the one Nathan always admired, transformed Thornton Tech from a mid-tier software company into a $2 billion industry leader. And Rebecca wasn't just the CEO's wife anymore. She was co-CEO, her name on patents, her face in Forbes features about power women in tech. Nathan watched from a distance, building his own empire, waiting for the perfect moment. His team thought he was focused on growth. His investors thought he was planning an IPO. But Nathan Porter was playing a completely different game. Then came the call that would change everything. His CFO stepped into his office with an unusual expression, somewhere between excitement and confusion. "Nathan, you need to see this. Thornton Tech is in trouble." The report laid it all out in brutal detail. Thornton Tech had overextended, betting big on a merger that fell through. They'd leveraged their assets, taken on debt, and now they were vulnerable. Not bankrupt, not yet, but for the first time in a decade, they needed capital. Nathan stared at the numbers, his heart pounding in a way that had nothing to do with business strategy. "They're looking for a buyer?" "Not publicly, but our sources say they're taking meetings, quiet ones. They want someone who'll keep the brand intact, keep the leadership structure." His CFO paused. "Keep Rebecca and Richard at the helm?" That's when Nathan made the decision that would define everything that came next. "Get me a meeting. Use the shell company, Apex Ventures. They don't need to know it's connected to me. If you can't stand people who abandon others at their lowest point, let me know in the comments. Type loyalty matters." Because what Nathan was about to do, let's just say, revenge is a dish best served with a $2 billion acquisition. The negotiation took 3 months. Apex Ventures, Nathan's carefully constructed shell company, offered $2.1 billion, exactly $100 million more than Thornton Tech's valuation, enough to make Richard and Rebecca jump at the deal, enough to solve all their problems. The contracts promised operational autonomy. The Thorntons would remain as co-CEOs. The brand would stay intact. All employees would keep their positions. It was, by all accounts, a perfect acquisition, a white knight saving a company in distress. Rebecca herself led the final negotiation call. Nathan sat in his office, listening to her voice through the speaker, confident, strategic, brilliant. The same voice that had called him a failure, the same mind he'd once loved, the same woman who'd left him when he needed him most. "Apex Ventures drives a hard bargain, but I think we've structured something that works for everyone. Richard and Rebecca are committed to maintaining the excellence that built Thornton Tech." Nathan's lawyer, one of only 3 people who knew the truth, glanced at him with a raised eyebrow. Nathan kept his face neutral, professional. "We're very impressed with your leadership, Mrs. Thornton. We look forward to the partnership." The word partnership tasted like acid on his tongue. Papers were signed. Press releases were drafted. Thornton Tech's board celebrated the deal that saved their company. Rebecca gave an interview about the exciting new chapter and how the acquisition would accelerate their vision. But there was a clause buried in Section 47 of the acquisition agreement, a clause Rebecca's lawyers had glossed over, a clause that gave Apex Ventures the right to restructure leadership at their discretion after a 90-day evaluation period. Nathan Porter had learned a lot in 8 years, including how to hide a knife in a contract. Day 90 arrived on a Tuesday in October. Nathan walked into Thornton Tech headquarters for the first time, not as a visitor, but as the owner. He'd sent the notification the night before. Mandatory all-hands meeting, including executive leadership, 10 a.m. sharp. Rebecca stood in the lobby, designer suit impeccable, greeting the mysterious Apex Ventures representative she'd never actually met in person. Her assistant had mentioned it would be their CEO, someone named... She'd forgotten the name, honestly. These venture capital types all blurred together. "Good morning." Her professional smile was warm, practiced. "We're honored to finally meet the team behind Apex. If you'll follow me to the..." She stopped, mid-sentence. Actually stopped walking, stopped breathing for a moment, stopped existing in the reality she'd known just seconds before. Because walking through those glass doors, flanked by lawyers and advisors, wearing a suit that cost more than the rent on that studio apartment she'd walked out of, was Nathan Porter. "Hello, Rebecca." His voice was calm. Too calm. "It's been a long time." The color drained from her face. Around them, Thornton Tech employees were gathering, confused by the tension crackling between their CEO and this stranger who somehow felt like a bomb about to detonate. "Nathan?" She barely whispered his name. "You... Apex Ventures is... mine." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Surprise. The boardroom felt smaller than it should have. Rebecca sat across from Nathan, Richard beside her, looking between them with growing confusion. The rest of the executive team shifted uncomfortably, sensing the undercurrent of something they didn't understand. "I don't understand." Richard's voice carried the authority of a man used to being in control. "Our contracts guarantee..." Section 47. Nathan's lawyer slid a highlighted document across the table. "Leadership restructuring rights after evaluation period. That period concluded yesterday." Rebecca's hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against the table, willing them to stop. "Why? Why would you let us think?" "Let you think what?" Nathan leaned back in his chair, the picture of casual power. "Let you think you were safe. Let you think you'd solved your problems without consequences." The room went silent. Someone coughed. A phone buzzed, ignored. 8 years ago. Nathan's voice was soft now, almost gentle, which somehow made it worse. "You told me I'd never succeed. You called me a dreamer, a failure. You left me at my absolute lowest point and married a man who could give you the life you wanted." "Nathan, we were different people." "I'm not finished." The gentleness evaporated. "You didn't just leave. You gave up on me. On us. You chose comfort over partnership. Certainty over faith. And you know what? Maybe you were right to do it. Maybe I was a bad bet. Maybe you made the smart choice." He stood up, buttoning his suit jacket. "But here's what you didn't consider. You never asked yourself what would happen if the failure you left behind stopped failing." Rebecca walked out of that meeting, no longer co-CEO of Thornton Tech. Richard resigned in solidarity, but Nathan's lawyers had anticipated that too. Golden parachutes that were generous enough to avoid lawsuits, strategic enough to ensure silence. Within a week, the news was everywhere. Mystery billionaire acquires Thornton Tech in a stunning power play. Ex-wife's company bought by man she divorced. The headlines were brutal, merciless. Exactly what Nathan had once dreamed they'd be. He should have felt triumph. He should have felt vindicated. Instead, standing in the corner office that used to be Rebecca's, looking out over the city, Nathan Porter felt hollow. His phone buzzed. A text from his brother. "You did it. You really did it. But bro, are you okay?" Was he okay? He just spent 8 years and $2 billion proving a point to a woman who'd broken his heart. He'd restructured his entire business strategy around revenge. He'd bought a company not because it made financial sense, though it did, but because it would hurt the person who hurt him. "Mr. Porter?" His new assistant's voice came through the intercom. "There's someone here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she says it's urgent." "A Rebecca Thornton?" Nathan's finger hovered over the button. Every logical bone in his body said to send her away. But something else that sounded suspiciously like the 28-year-old who once loved her said differently. "Send her in." She looked different without the armor of corporate power. Smaller somehow, standing in the doorway in jeans and a sweater, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. This was Rebecca before Thornton Tech, before the Forbes features, before she became half of a power couple. "I'm not here to beg for my job back." Her first words came out stronger than he'd expected. "I know that's not possible, and honestly, I'm not sure I'd want it anyway." Nathan gestured to the chair across from his. She sat down, and the space between them felt like it held 8 years of choices they couldn't undo. "Then why are you here?" "Because you deserve to say it." Rebecca's voice cracked slightly. "You deserve to hear me admit that I was wrong, that I gave up on you when I should have stayed, that I chose the easy path and lost someone irreplaceable." He wanted her words to feel like victory. Instead, they felt like grief. "I was scared, Nathan." She was crying now, not bothering to hide it. "We were so broke, and I watched you pouring everything into something that seemed impossible. I didn't have your faith. I didn't have your courage. And instead of admitting that, I made it about you. I called you a failure to justify my own cowardice. You married someone else within a month, Rebecca." "I married security. I married the opposite of uncertainty. I married everything you weren't. And I spent 8 years trying to convince myself I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. Building a company, building a reputation, building anything that would prove I hadn't made the biggest mistake of my life." Nathan stood up, walked to the window. His reflection stared back at him. Successful, wealthy, powerful. Everything Rebecca had said he'd never become. "You want absolution?" "No." Her answer surprised him. "I want you to know that your success, it wasn't just about proving me wrong. You would have succeeded anyway. That's what I failed to see. Your dream wasn't the problem, my faith was." The weeks that followed were strange, uncomfortable. Nothing like the clean narrative of revenge Nathan had imagined. Thornton Tech's integration into his portfolio was messy. Rebecca stayed in the city, started consulting, appeared on podcasts talking about failure and resilience in ways that felt raw and real. And Nathan started to question everything he'd built his empire on. His therapist, yeah, billionaires have therapists, asked him a question that hit like a punch to the gut. You spent 8 years proving you weren't a failure. But Nathan, who were you really trying to prove it to? Rebecca or yourself? That night, unable to sleep, Nathan pulled out an old box from storage. Inside was the duct-taped laptop, the divorce papers, a photo of him and Rebecca from their wedding day. Both of them so young, so hopeful, so naive about how hard life was about to get. Also in the box was a letter he'd written but never sent, drafted 2 years after the divorce during a particularly dark moment. He read it now with 8 years of distance. Dear Rebecca, I hope you're happy. I really do, because I realize that what I'm building isn't about proving you wrong. It's about proving to myself that I was worth believing in, that my dream was worth the sacrifice, that I'm more than the failure you saw in me. But here's the thing. I don't know if success will ever fill the hole that opened up the day you walked away. Some wounds heal. Some just get covered up by achievement and money and the illusion of having moved on. I guess I'll find out which kind this is. He'd been so angry when he wrote that, but reading it now, all he could hear was pain. The kind of pain that money couldn't fix. The kind that buying your ex-wife's company couldn't heal. Comment worth believing in if you think people deserve second chances, even when they mess up. Because what Nathan realized next changed everything. The coffee shop was the same one they'd gone to in their struggling years. It was nicer now. The neighborhood had gentrified, but Nathan had requested they meet there anyway. Some kind of symbolic circle closing he needed. Rebecca arrived exactly on time, that punctuality he'd always admired still intact. They ordered. She still took her coffee the same way, which made his chest tight, and sat by the window. I've been thinking about why I did it, the acquisition, the whole revenge plan, and I realized something that's going to sound crazy. Try me. There was almost a smile on her face. I think we're past crazy. I wasn't trying to hurt you. I was trying to make you see me. He laughed, but it sounded hollow. How messed up is that? I spent 8 years and $2 billion essentially screaming, "Look at me. I'm not who you thought I was." Like I was still that guy in the studio apartment desperate for his wife's approval. Rebecca was quiet for a long moment. And now that I see you, now that the whole world sees you, how does it feel? Empty. The honesty surprised even him. I thought it would feel like winning. It just feels like I've been running towards something that doesn't exist anymore. The Rebecca who left me, she's not even the same person sitting here now. Neither am I. I've been fighting a ghost. So what now? He pulled out a document, not a contract this time, but something else. Thornton Tech is profitable, very profitable. And despite everything, you and Richard built something remarkable. So here's what I'm proposing. I sell the company back to you, at cost, $2.1 billion. Rebecca's eyes widened. Nathan, I don't have structured payment plan, favorable terms. You'll probably spend the next 15 years paying it off, but you'll own what you built. You'll have a second chance to do it right. Why would you do that? He met her eyes. Because I finally figured out what I actually wanted. Not revenge, not vindication. I wanted proof that my faith in myself wasn't misplaced, that I was worth believing in. And Rebecca, I got that proof. I built something that matters. The acquisition, that wasn't about you. It was about me still being that scared kid who needed external validation. I'm done being that person. Tears were streaming down her face now. I don't deserve this. Maybe not, but maybe that's not the point. Maybe the point is that I deserve to let this go, to stop carrying around the ghost of who we were and actually live in who I am now. They talked for 2 more hours, not about contracts or companies, but about the years between, the marriages and divorces, the struggles and victories, the ways they'd both changed and stayed the same. It wasn't reconciliation, wasn't romance. It was something quieter, closure. When they stood to leave, Rebecca touched his arm. Nathan, I'm proud of you. Not because you succeeded, because you became someone who could choose grace over revenge. That's the success that actually matters. He nodded, not trusting his voice, and walked out into the autumn afternoon. Behind him, the ghosts of their younger selves, broke, hopeful, doomed, finally stopped haunting him. 6 months later, the sale was finalized. Rebecca was back at Thornton Tech's helm, this time as sole owner, carrying debt that would take years to clear, but also carrying the kind of gratitude and humility that made her a better leader than she had ever been. And Nathan? Nathan started dating someone new, a teacher who didn't care about his net worth and had never heard of synergy. On their 3rd date, she asked him what he did for a living. I build things, he said simply, and sometimes I have to tear them down to figure out what I actually wanted to build. She smiled, not quite understanding, but accepting it anyway. That sounds complicated. It was, he agreed, but I think I finally figured it out. Because here's what 8 years and $2 billion taught Nathan Porter. Success isn't about proving other people wrong. It's about proving yourself right. Not right that you're better than someone else, but right that you're worthy of your own faith, your own persistence, your own grace. Rebecca had called him a failure at his lowest point. She'd been wrong, but not in the way he thought. He'd never been a failure, not when he was sleeping on his brother's couch, not when he was eating ramen, not when his wife walked away. He'd been someone building something, and the only person who needed to believe in that building was him. The revenge he'd planned was spectacular. The grace he'd chosen instead, that was the real victory.